Well, welcome to today's episode of TMI Advice You Didn't Want. Today, we are talking about our spiritual journeys and the crazy ride that both of us have gone on to get where we are. My name is Karin Angelly. I am one of the co hosts here, and it's been a fun journey, right? Like, it's been a crazy ride. So, I'm here with.
My name is Ashley, and I definitely think it's been a crazy ride as well. But I also don't feel like it's been as painful as some people have talked about, my spiritual journey, at least, in,
Yeah,
in some
true.
regards.
Yeah. I think everybody's journey is just so different. That's the fun thing about what we're going to be talking about today is that, like, Ashley, you and I, we kind of went through it at the same time, but
Mhm.
also, like, we don't live in the same place. Like, we're in completely different countries. So it's like we would talk about things that we would experience and how we were moving along through our journey, but we weren't necessarily in the same environment. So it would be fun to kind of be like, well, this is what I'm experiencing. What's going on with you right now? So it's definitely been, I don't know, it's just been a wild ride. So we were talking before we jumped on about um, our whole concept of like that Christian faith. And Ashley, you had asked me, this was years ago at this point. I don't even remember when it was, but you had asked me years ago who Jesus was. And I just remember, I don't remember what my response was at that point. Like, I don't know if you remember my response. Do you remember my
I
response?
don't think so, but I remember it was like along the same lines of my feeling of like that deconstruction of your faith because
Yes.
we both have very different family backgrounds, but we both had the same faith backgrounds. And
Mm.
so to deconstruct that was really hard. Like I just
Oh,
I have
yeah.
remember like Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and you only get to heaven through him. And that was like 100% like my foundation. And then to be like, yeah, Jesus
Wait.
isn't God. Like,
Yeah. Like, wait a minute.
mhm.
I have the same possibility inside of me that Jesus did. And
Yeah.
so like I know like for both of us, like you said, we had the same we had different backgrounds as far as family, but as far as like our religion, we were both Christian, right? Like I was like heavy evangelical Christian, and you told me recently and I was like, "Oh my God, you were? You like what was it
Well,
that you
so
were?"
well for me it was a little different because my parents were basically like atheists. Like they didn't
Hmm.
believe anything. My mom kind of jumped on like the like trendy stuff. My dad was raised kind of Catholic with a broken home. And so like there just was like nothing there. We went to church as like a community family thing until I was 8. And then they were like, okay, that's enough. We don't need to do this anymore. And then I kept going to like camps with my friends and all that kind of stuff. And I like drank it hard. Like I totally went into all of it. And I was like this firm rule follower and believer, which is funny for me because I'm not a rule follower in any area of my life other than that area of my life. And yeah, so then I ended up going to a private school that was Bergthaler Mennonite. And this is like
That's what it was.
way filled with
Mennonite.
caps
Yes.
and like dresses all the time. Like so like it's like one step away from like the Hutterites, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so yeah, it was intense. Like we weren't allowed piercings in school. We weren't allowed, the guys had to cut their hair if it got too long. They weren't allowed jeans until like 2 years before I started. Like I started for my middle school, high school years, and 2 years before I started in the school, they weren't allowed to wear jeans in school. Like it was very, very strict. And it was great school teacher wise, but yeah, and it was insane really to go from
Yeah.
that to where I am now.
Right? Like I'll never forget. I didn't know that you were Mennonite until it was only recently that you told me. And
Mhm.
I like my jaw dropped to the floor and I was like, my husband's name is Matthew and I was like, "Oh my God, Matthew, did you know that she was Mennonite?" I was like, "Oh my God, I thought we were strict because
Yeah.
I grew up Baptist. Like my family like still to this day is very heavily Baptist and I just keep my mouth shut honestly when people
Yeah.
have conversations about it because I'm like I'm glad for you that that still works. And this is how I look at it. All things spiritual, all things religious. I'm glad for you that that works for you, but it stopped working for me a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. And like, one thing that I don't miss about my Christian roots is that you felt, and you probably felt like this too, Ashley, you felt like you had to save people and you had to show them the way that
Yeah.
Jesus was the only way to heaven.
Yeah.
And like now I'm so far from that that I'm like, I really like, if it makes you happy, go for it. But stop trying to make everybody fit into the same box because it doesn't make any sense anymore.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
it just doesn't.
I was watching a TikTok like this week that was really interesting. And it was a guy that was talking about how he's an atheist. And
Mm,
he was talking with a Christian, and he's like, really, you're only one step away from being an atheist. There's like 500 gods on this earth, and you've chosen to not believe in 499 of them. And I just believe in one less God than you. And I was just like, oh, that's a really interesting concept. Like, because
mm,
really, how are you to sift through all the different religions and really know like this is the right one?
right. Yeah. And I just like, I remember when I first started really questioning what I believed, I had just started down the path of like meditation because I was like, I want something different in my life. And I had a mentor that was like, she was a Christian and she
Mhm.
started meditating. And I'm like, well, I guess it can't be all that bad because I remember being told that
Yeah.
meditation is like of the devil and you shouldn't meditate. And I was like, well, she's a Christian and she's doing it. So I started to kind of like tiptoe into it.
Mhm.
And as I started to tiptoe, I started realizing I was sitting in church and I was listening to the pastor and I was going, I don't believe what he's saying anymore is
Mhm.
true.
Yeah.
And I also remember like one really big deconstruction piece for me was reading through the Bible. I had read through the Bible a few times before the last time that I read through it. And the last time I read through the Bible was like my breaking point because I read through it where it's what is that chronologically where like it's time like
Mhm.
as
Yeah.
time is not how the books not canon cannot what's that word where you go through by canon by each
Yeah.
book of the Bible. I started reading through it chronologically, so
Yeah.
time wise, and I started to see that there was pieces of the Bible that were not actually lining up. So, like, I was brought up in the faith where it was like the Bible is infallible and like there are no mistakes and blah, blah, blah. And as I'm reading through for the last time, it actually might have been the second to the last time because I still really held on like really tight before I finally let go.
Yeah.
But I just remember reading through and being like, how come there are so many discrepancies? And I was reading a study Bible too. So
Mhm.
I'm reading this study Bible and I'm looking at the notes in the study Bible. And the study Bible is like, oh, this and this don't line up, and this don't line up. And I'm like, how is this infallible? Like, I don't understand. Like,
Yeah.
what the
Yes.
world?
Yeah. No, I hear you.
I just remember like people will ask me sometimes what started my deconstruction, and that was a big piece of it. Reading through the
Mhm.
Bible, and people will look at me like I have 10 heads when I say that. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, but there's a lot of scandal in there too. Like God doesn't come off very good.
No. Well, and that's like for me, I was like, well, there's a different God. Like I kind of dissociated the two, like from the Old Testament to the New Testament.
Mhm,
And it's like, but it's the same person. And
mhm.
then for me, I was like, well, it's just loosely translated. Like it's not translated as well. You have to like really understand like the original language. And those were my justifications at the time. But no, it's pretty bad. And it's also though I still refer to it in a lot of things. Like the scripture verse that I believe I said in the beginning of this is like Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. It's like that's still true. He is, but I am, and you are,
as well.
like
Mhm.
we are the way, the truth, and the life. And we have that power. And so I still find a lot of scripture is legitimate in that regard. Like I really love like having faith as small as a mustard seed and you can move mountains. Like I teach
Mhm.
that to my kids. They have no concept whatsoever of who Jesus is, what church is, what God is. And I might take them one day just to be like, this is what people do on Sundays and this is what I used to do. But like the whole idea is like completely gibberish to them. But
Right.
I teach them that they have that power, and that's pretty cool. So there still is like those nuggets, because I think that Jesus was a great prophet, but
Absolutely.
definitely
Yeah.
not the whole God as like the superior being. So
Right, right. And like the other piece of it that was so hard for me to wrap my brain around too, that was like, I think this was like the clincher for me that I was like, okay, I got to figure out something else because this isn't working for me anymore,
mhm.
was for Matthew's school. So he went to school for theology, right? Like he wanted to be a pastor. That's how deep we were in this, right? You were too. Okay, that's
I
crazy.
was a youth pastor for a year,
Oh
and
my
I went to,
God. I
yeah,
didn't know
yeah.
that.
And I went to school for theology, and I went back and forth between wanting to be like a professor or like something of that sort. And yeah.
Yeah. So we were both like we were drinking the Kool-Aid, let's just
Yep.
say that.
Yep.
So, but I'll never forget Matthew went to a theological school that was more progressive, right? And there was one of the assignments that he had to do was to go to a church that wasn't of his religion, of his faith, right? So he chose to go to a Jewish synagogue, which really
Interesting.
wrecked me because I'm like, these people believe in the same God that I do, but because they don't believe in Jesus, they're going to hell. And I
Mhm.
remember getting in the car after being in that sermon being like, those people were friggin' like, they were fucking awesome. They were
Yeah.
so nice to us. They wanted to help us when we didn't know what was going on in the session. Like, we had
Yeah.
literally, like, there was a point where we had to stand up and turn towards, it's kind of like when, I'm gonna get the religion wrong, but when they turn towards Mecca in a certain religion, I can't even think of what it is right now, but it was
Oh,
the same concept. They stood up and turned towards the back of the room. And Matthew and I were like, what do we do? And everybody was like, turn around, turn around. But these people were so gracious, so
yeah.
compassionate in that moment and for the whole session
Uh,
that when we got in the car, I looked at Matthew and I was like, so you're telling me that all of those people are going to hell? That
mhm.
doesn't work for me. I
Yeah.
can't handle that. Like, what in the world, what kind of God would be like, oh no, I've decided that because you are so sinful, I can't be with you, and I created you in order to love me. What kind of narcissistic God then would send me to hell because I don't love him? Like,
Yeah.
what the fuck? Like,
Yeah.
that didn't work for me.
No,
So,
no, I agree. There's a lot of things that don't work for me, but
yeah. What was the thing that you were like, okay, I'm done. I can't anymore? Or
it
was
was
it
it
was
was
it just
really like
like,
the community for me. Like,
mm,
I'm someone that pours in like
mm,
wholeheartedly always. And same with the church. Like I volunteered, I worked in the youth groups, like I did a lot. This is after I had stepped away from being a youth pastor and I was in a different church. So I didn't have the same ties there, but I was a member and all that kind of stuff. And so for me, it was all focused around my accident. So
mm.
when I had the accident happen, I had none of the pastors come to the hospital. And that's like one of like the key things that pastors do when
Yeah.
someone's in the hospital. I had people from the church that were my friends come to visit me and that kind of stuff. And I was just like, that's really weird. And like that church, the pastor, so I was 24 when I was hit by a drunk driver, and I had a relationship with that pastor since I was 15, so almost 10 years where I
Wow.
worked with
That you
him.
worked with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like he came to my camp, I went to his youth group, and then he started doing like young adults. And so like I was connected to him for nearly a decade and he didn't come. And I was just like, that just seems wrong. And I had a chip on my shoulder. Like I volunteered with him, I did so much stuff, and I'm just like, no, that doesn't sit right with me. So I stopped going to church after that point and wasn't really sure if I'd ever go back. I did go back about a year and a half later to one church service. And I was just like, this doesn't feel right anymore. This doesn't like bring me peace and community like it used to.
Yeah.
And I was just like, and it was a different church. And so I never went back after that. But it was all the other stuff, just like the inner knowing that really was my deconstruction. But that was my deconstruction from church specifically. So
Yeah, no, I can 100% like relate to that. Not that I was, not that you were shunned in that situation, but that you weren't visited. That's a big thing. But I
yeah.
remember as a kid, I think I was in high school at this point, my best friend, her mom got a divorce. And
Mm,
I remember the church not treating her very well.
mm,
And I
yeah.
just remember being like, what in the world? What kind of hypocrisy is that? And
Yeah.
I get, at the end of the day, I get that we're all flawed.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not here to be like, oh, these people are so terrible because they didn't take care of me in XYZ time. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
I get we all have our own prejudices and stuff, but the really difficult thing is just like it's supposed to be about love, and
Hmm.
unfortunately it's not always that way.
Yeah.
And that's the hard thing is that I don't feel like enough Christians are standing up and going, okay, I made a big mistake. I probably shouldn't have done that. Like, I don't see that enough. Like, I think that that's what turns off a lot of people
Hmm.
because it's not that I'm asking you to be perfect. I'm not asking you to be the golden child. All I'm asking is for you to just say, hey, I made a mistake
Yeah.
and I shouldn't have treated you like that. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, I don't hear that enough from Christians. And
No.
so, like you said, like the community, it can make or break
Yeah.
a lot of things. And that's really like I feel like we're wired like that as human beings. We
Hmm.
want that community. And when community fails us, we go, well, what the fuck?
Exactly. Definitely.
So, but yeah, I mean, from there, what made you be like, okay, I want to start going on this
Yeah.
different spiritual realm, this different path? What got you there?
Well, it was the moment I got hit. Like it was this like magical awakening moment essentially. So like I was walking across the street when a drunk driver hit me. Like he was supposed to stop for a red light and he hit me. And I remember realizing he's going insane fast. There's no way he's going to be able to stop. And this thought process happened like that, right? Because it was like that and then
Yeah,
I was hit.
yeah.
And so they clocked him after the fact, saying they believed he was going 80 kilometers, which would be like roughly 60 miles.
Shit. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's wild. Yeah,
Yeah. So
that's
probably
wild.
around 55 miles, I think would be more accurate. But anyways, roughly around that range. And so that's what they clocked him at. And I remember thinking to myself, so my cousin died of a car accident where he was a pedestrian 3 years previous to that, I believe. And
Mhm.
then my other cousin was in a car accident and she has a severe brain injury where she can't function. She needs 24/7 care. And I just remember
Mm.
thinking, like, neither of those scenarios are options. Like, I'm not done here and I'm not going to have any lasting negative effects from this. And I just remember deciding that. And some people would be like, oh, yeah, you prayed. And I'm like, it wasn't a prayer though. Like, I didn't say, God, help me. And that's what I started wrestling with a lot after the fact. So I got hit. I was told over the next 8 months, probably the numerous ways I should have died, where I was like a miracle in like 5 to 8 different ways, where they're like, I can't believe you survived for this reason, this reason, this reason.
Yeah.
And so I wrestled with a little bit of like survivor's guilt was what I labeled it as, but what
Mm.
it really was like a spiritual like what the fuck, because I was like it was not a prayer and it was not God that saved me, and I just had this deep feeling inside of me that it was not God that saved me and it was not a prayer and it was me that chose this, and
Mm.
it didn't make sense to me, and I wrestled with that. I couldn't make sense of that. And I was someone that didn't agree with like Reiki. I thought Reiki was from the devil, just like
Oh
you,
yeah.
meditation was from the devil. And
Mhm.
so it was a really hard thing to figure out because I had shunned that whole spiritual community. So I didn't have anyone like that in my circle. And slowly I started getting referred to people. So I was referred to someone that would do Pilates for me, and she was a Pilates personal trainer. She also did Reiki. And so I'm like, okay, we'll just do Pilates and nothing else, kind of thing. And then she referred me to someone that did body talk. And body talk was a completely different concept. So I didn't realize it should be shunned too. And so I went and I'm like, okay, that was really weird, but it helped. And so then I kind of got my feet into that whole spiritual sense and started doing the spiritual stuff. And then that rocked me even more. And then she recommended me to a psychic, and I actually went, which was
Oh
crazy.
yeah.
Yeah, and then she recommended me to go see two different massage therapists. She said they have like they're spiritual, so they'll be able to help you more. And I was open enough at that point to go to see them. And then they recommended one of them I went to see, and she did Reiki, body talk, craniosacral, the whole works. And she recommended me to Bridget, who I'm sure she'll come up as we talk. So I'll use her name. So she does feng shui and a whole bunch of different stuff. And I did like a huge, like, and this is like probably a 2.5 year process to go from like that Pilates instructor all the way to, and maybe even longer, to be honest, because
Mm.
I was very against it. It took a long time of me getting to that desperation level of like, nothing's working. I'll try this. Oh, that
Mm.
worked. Okay, there has to be something here. I can't keep shunning this. And then like keeping that process going. And Bridget came and did this house clearing, and I think it was a 2-day process where she was in my home doing spiritual stuff. And she at one point said, your soul fragmented at that accident. And so you were meant to die. That was meant to be the end of your timeline. And you chose to stay here. And I was
Yeah.
just like, chills, holy shit. That's
I
exactly
have
what
chills.
happened.
Like, holy shit. You can't see them, but holy shit.
Yeah. And so I just knew that that was the truth. Like it was like completely in me, like that was what happened. And she explained the whole thing to me, and she did a soul retrieval for me, and it was like this missing link. Like if you guys have never done a soul retrieval, like it is so freaking powerful. I like, especially for me after my accident, I felt so off. Like off is like the biggest understatement ever. And then it made me not feel off. It made me feel whole again, which makes sense because my soul was fragmented and then it wasn't. And so that was my realization. And from that point on is where my real deconstruction started happening, because I could make sense of it. So I could actually start deconstructing. And so, yeah. So that's where I'm like, it wasn't a painful process for me. Like the accident was. And then like
Yeah, the painful
I
process was the accident.
yes. And then I wrestled with like, what is this? Like, how did I stop this, like, or stop myself from dying? Because I couldn't make sense of it. But after that, like I didn't really feel like there was like deep rooted trauma and demons in my closet, which is what a lot of people go through. So we'll have to like chat about that too. But for me, that wasn't my story. I didn't have this um like, to put Derek on the spot, my partner, he has this deep rooted trauma, and whenever he gets too close to it, it's like, okay, bye. Like
Yeah.
that's too hard, and it because it's so painful for him, and I
Yeah.
just didn't have that. And so yeah, it's very different, and most people are like him, where they have that deep rooted pain where it makes spiritual awakenings very, very challenging. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And like you said, I didn't have that kind of trauma either to work
Mhm.
through.
Yeah.
I mean, the trauma that I had was from the church, let's be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
So, and you probably have the same kind of trauma, but it was also like, it wasn't trauma at the same time because we could look at it and go, okay, well, I can let that go. That's not really like the trauma that we're talking about when we're
Yeah.
talking about trauma. It was just like, yeah. So my process was not similar in that I didn't get hit by a car, but it was literally just like one day I woke up and I was like, this doesn't fit anymore. I have way too many questions that, like, I've thought about these questions before and somebody always talked it away. And I used to talk it away until it got to a point where I can't talk it away anymore.
Yeah.
And there was another, so it's funny, my husband and I went through the whole deconstruction process together at the same time too.
Yeah.
And he started, like, when I started my deconstruction, he was also like listening to this podcast.
Mm.
His name is Mike McHargue. His podcast was Ask Science Mike at the time. And he went through his own deconstruction period as well, where he
Yeah.
literally was he was also a Baptist, heavily Baptist, and then one day woke up and was like, this doesn't fit for me anymore either.
Hmm.
And he actually had somebody suggest that he read, oh God, what's the name of the author? He's heavily atheist. I can't think of his name right now. I'll think of it later when we get off of here. But he had his atheist friend suggest, hey, you should read this book. And it was by an atheist author. So he read it because he was curious.
Yeah.
And basically, in the book, it was talking about prayer and how, like, you could pray to God or you could pray to a carton of milk and you could have some sort of outcome happen. And so
Mhm.
Mike McHargue is like, I'm going to pray to a gallon of milk for a week to see if I can get a promotion. And he did. He
Oh my
prayed to a
gosh,
gallon
that's
of milk
awesome.
for a week and he ended up getting a promotion or whatever it was that he was going after. And
Yeah.
that's what like rocked him. He's like, holy shit, I just prayed to a gallon of milk
Hmm.
and this thing happened. So he's like, something's going on here. And so, like, Matthew starts listening to this podcast about this guy that had been through his own deconstruction period.
Yeah.
And I started listening to it too. And I'm like, oh, he's right. Oh, shit. Oh, that's right too. Oh no. Ah, like literally, I'm going through my own like meditation. I'm learning about meditation at the
Yeah.
same time listening to this podcast. And it was like this like double whammy of, oh, fuck, I can't keep thinking the way that I am. This doesn't work for me anymore.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But I remember too, because I feel like I was like in that process and kind of like egging you on a little bit. I don't know if that's the right word, but I remember just asking you about going to Bridget. And I remember, I think it was like a year process of me telling you to go to Bridget. And then
It
finally,
was, yeah, it was a year process. Yeah.
yes. And but you were doing all this other stuff. Like you were doing the meditation, you were going to do cranial sacral, I think, and you were seeing another person and all of that. And I feel like when both of us started seeing Bridget, it was just like boom, everything exploded and we were on the same page. So,
Actually, Bridget is who told me to do craniosacral because she's like,
oh, okay.
oh, your head and your neck. She's like, it's like somebody took a baseball bat to your head.
Oh boy.
And I was like, oh shit, that's wild. And then
Yeah.
when I went to my craniosacral therapist, he said the exact same thing to me. And I was like, okay, good. Like, that's weird. So, yeah. But it did take me about a year to go to her because I was kind of like, I don't know that I need that. Like, I had already
Mhm.
gotten pretty deep into meditation at that point, and I was like, I think I'm doing pretty good, like
Mhm.
on my own. But the beautiful thing about working with other people is they can help point out blind spots that you
Yeah.
might have along the way. And
Yeah.
so that's one thing, like you and I have had this conversation a lot through this process where it's like, do I go to somebody that can do a personal clearing for me? Do I not?
Yeah.
And like it is a personal choice.
Hmm.
But whoever you go to, you have to make sure that their energy actually aligns with you and you
Yeah.
have to protect your own energy first and foremost.
Oh, for
Cuz
sure.
like that's something that Bridget has said to me before. She's like, "Listen, like if you go to someone else, that's okay, but be careful who you go to because you could get really fucked up along the process."
Yeah.
So, That's what I appreciated about her, is that she was really honest. Her and then another one of our mentors, very honest about, okay, like you got to protect your energy. There are people out there that can mess with you and you have to be
Yeah.
careful. So, but like for me, like as I go through the meditation journey, I realize too that like I can do all of this stuff for myself.
Hmm.
Is it helpful to have other people along the process? 100%. And so
Yeah.
I still keep these people like Bridget in my back pocket,
Yeah.
but I also realize like I am powerful enough
Yeah.
to actually dig that stuff out on my own. So
For sure.
I know you and I, Ashley, have had this conversation back and forth a lot, where at one point I was like, I think I'm done with Bridget. And like recently I've been like, okay, I might have some more blind spots that I need help digging out. So like for me, I know I go through this is life, right? Like with
Yeah.
spiritual, with anything. You go through this roller coaster where you're like, okay, I got it, I'm doing great. And then you're like, wait, I do think I need some help.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a process. So,
Yeah.
wow, that was a tangent.
Well,
Maybe a
I
little TMI.
I think for me it's more so like when I like have taken on too much, and like I do that a lot to myself, and then it's like, okay, I need help, like, and I'll reach out to those people for help.
Mm,
Or when there's something really crazy that I have like stirred up in me, and I'm like, oh, okay, this feels really crazy, I want to bounce it off of people. I
mm,
find that those are the times for me, like in my everyday life. Or like Bridget talks about how she has people that like see her every month, like for a regular checkup. Like I just don't feel like
I
that's
feel like that's
necessary. Like then
necessary.
you're not doing the work yourself, you're not standing in your own
Exactly.
power. But I find when I'm like, whoa, that's really crazy. Is this like legit? Then I need to check in with someone because I haven't been to that level of crazy yet. That's more so when I'm reaching out
Well,
to someone in my back.
yeah, definitely. And you talk about like how, and I remember Bridget telling me that she has people check in with her
Yeah.
every month. And the thing with that is, like you said, I don't agree that that's necessary, because you do need to do the work on your own. If you're
Mhm.
having someone come in and do like some sort of personal clearing every single month, you actually have to look at your brain and go, wait a minute, what am I thinking that I keep creating certain things in my life? You can
Yeah.
change that. And that's the thing that's not always easy,
Yeah.
but it is so empowering when you do it for yourself. I
Yeah.
think that's the piece of it that I
Mhm.
really appreciate about being able to do this for myself, like go through this spiritual journey, dig out the stuff that's hard and letting it go.
Mhm.
Is that when I actually do it for myself, it's so fucking empowering. I'm like, I didn't have anyone else do that but me. And I love that. That's so empowering.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe it's a little pride too, because I'm like, I did that. But I mean, whatever. Whatever.
But I think that it's hard too, because that's the part that a lot of people run away from. We're so
Absolutely.
trained for easy. We're so trained to have like a dishwasher wash our dishes instead of us washing them ourselves or whatever, for that random example. But we are used to going to a doctor, getting prescribed a medication, and that being our fix. And
Right.
so that's really like the like for me, the whole deconstruction of my whole life is we don't need to have any of those quick fixes, because they're not
Right.
fixing anything, they're just a band-aid.
Right.
And we're just paying someone to make us feel good. That's how
Yeah.
I feel with going regularly. And even for like massage and chiro, like for my injuries, that's something that I always did on a very regular basis. And then my mentor was like, you need to stop going, like you're powerful enough
You're
to do it
lying.
yourself.
Mhm.
And I'm like, yeah, that's a lot of work.
It is a lot of
Like
work.
that's how
Mhm.
we're trained to think. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think
But it's
that's part of it.
worth it, because it does
Mhm.
create that empowering piece that it's
Yeah.
like, oh, damn, I did that. And
Yeah.
okay, I can continue to do that for myself.
Yeah.
So it's
Well, I think that's
definitely
when
a
you level
process.
up too, and
Mhm.
like just um have a different level of awareness and power over yourself, and it also increases your happiness too.
Yeah. Well, and to kind of tie this back to the whole Jesus thing,
Hmm.
when Jesus went and he healed somebody, he said, go and sin no more. What
Hmm.
did he mean by that? You got to you fix the thought process that created whatever this is that I'm healing right now.
Yeah.
That is the only way to heal yourself
Yeah.
fully.
Yeah.
Jesus is literally like, he's giving you the band-aid to help you. This is what it feels like to feel good. And that's what I appreciated about working with Bridget when I first worked
Yes.
with her.
Yeah.
This is what it feels like to feel good. Now go and do it for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is so fucking powerful when somebody can help you go, oh, this is what it feels like to be like normal. And I'm putting air quotes up because like, I mean, what is normal really? But at the end of the day, like you're being shown this is how you can feel
Mm-hmm.
if you continue to work on yourself, work on your thoughts, and dig out the thoughts that are not serving you whatsoever. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting process, but
Mhm.
yeah. So, I mean, with that, I think we did it for our first episode. This is fun. I am so excited for all the weird conversations that we're gonna have and all the TMI that we're gonna say that people are like, did they really just talk about like
Yes.
their coffee enema? Like we're gonna talk about coffee enemas on this too because we both like them. They're awesome. If you don't know what it is, you should because they're great. But
Yes.
but with that, Ashley, I'm excited that you're my friend. I'm excited that we're doing this together, and I'm excited to create more TMI and share more advice that you probably didn't want. So
Yes.
yeah.
And all the new stuff that's going to come out of this as well. I'm sure we'll be introduced to stuff that's even more weird that we can try and talk about
Oh
too.
God, yeah. Oh yeah. Like I'm already doing stuff right now that I haven't even told you about yet that I'm like, oh my God, this is gonna be fun to talk about when I actually figure this out a little bit more. So
Awesome. I'm excited.
so yeah. So anyways, can't wait to hang out with everyone next time for TMI advice you didn't want.